All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Chile Box 2.0. It's the second time we'll put a Chilean box together. Last time was more of kind of an overview of kind of different sectors and all of that. I mean, this month is kind of like that too. We're going to move around a little bit, but it's going to be a little more focused, a lot more emphasis on, except for the last week, a lot more focus on just kind of the non popular, kind of overlooked, underappreciated, flying under the radar kind of great varieties of Chile. For those of you who've been around for a while, Chile has always been one of my darling wine producing countries of South America or Latin America. And not only in terms of value, but just the quality of the wines, as well as just diverse styles that come out. So yeah, pretty excited to kind of put this together. Last time I put it together, there were a lot of wines that were not necessarily available, but there were some wines that we were finally able to get our hands on. That's kind of the inspiration behind all this, but I'm pretty excited to explore Chile. I'm always excited to drink Chilean wines. So yeah, pretty excited. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I know Andrea and Todd, but officially joining us for the first time, I know Andrea, you actually, I don't even know if you need explanation of the grid. I think you've done the grid at one point, but at least Todd, welcome. For those of you who are not familiar with who I am, my name is Woong. That's spelled W-O-O-N-G, as you see on the screen, but it's pronounced, that W is silent. So Woong with a G at the end is an authentic way of saying it in Korean, but over the years of people butchering my name, that G also has become progressively silent. So Un, like moon without the M, noon without the first N, spoon without the SP, or whichever one is more comfortable for you, easier for you. I respond to both. So there that is. Just a couple of ground rules here at 6 Foot Wine Club. One is, so the first hour, just to give you an idea, the first hour, 8:30 to 9:30 is kind of like the learning hour, the regular programming. This is where I'm going to go through the geography, the producer profile. We're going to taste the wine through the grid. You will see what that means in a minute, Todd. And then after that, it kind of turns into this kind of virtual wine bar where we drink wine, hang out, and you can log off whenever you want to go home, and you are already home. So that's the whole idea. But in order to move things kind of on time, I asked that if you have any questions, put it in the chat box, or just hold on to those questions until you are prompted for questions. So yeah, that's the ground rule number one. Ground rule number two is, we're all adults with various different backgrounds and belief system and all of that, and we're all drinking wine. And sometimes, and this has happened, some things may be said, or you may say something that may offend people, or you may be offended by something that you hear. When those things occur and brought to my attention, we're going to address that as a group. It's all interest of keeping the space feeling safe and fun. Know that it's all coming from a place of love and respect, not from a place of scolding or censorship. Want all of you to show up authentically as yourselves, but just know that we as adults, we're going to deal with it when those things occur. So those are the only two real ground rules. Otherwise, I mean, we got a liter bottle today. Pour yourself a fat ass glass of wine. It's a hump day. Get a little hopped up, make some bad decisions. That's more fun that way. Just another announcement. Case Club will go live tomorrow. So Todd and Andrea, if you're not familiar with what Case Club is, all those cases of wines you might have seen at Cecilia's house that probably came from Case Club. But it's essentially a perk program that we offer to members here. So at the beginning, the first Thursday of each month, the day following the first tasting, you will have an opportunity to purchase all the wines that you tasted from the previous month at or near wholesale price, depending on how much you buy. Basically, more you buy, the cheaper it comes. It's kind of the idea. Obviously, you guys didn't join last month, so you don't know what wine we're talking about. You have to taste them, but you're more than welcome to participate in those. So all the wines that last month was a rosé month.
I
So all
tasted
the
all 4 of them with Cecilia,
perfect,
so I'm ready to buy some of them. Thank you.
excellent. I mean, that was the whole point of the rosé box, get it ready for the summertime coming up. So yeah, if there's anything that spoke to you, you will have a chance to do so. As well as some other things that popped up, didn't make it into the box for one reason or another. I'll usually put those up there as well. So that will all go live tomorrow. So watch out for my email for that. Besides that, I don't really have any other announcement. Oh, I guess there is one other announcement, which is I am moving to South Carolina on the 27th of this month. So it is happening. Don't worry, Wine Club will still go on. I'm going to be traveling back to DC regularly, probably every month, if not every other month, at the current juncture. But as of 27th, I will be spending majority of my time in Columbia, South Carolina. So Jesselyn, my partner, got a job at University of South Carolina, so we're going to go down there and bring this heathen down to the south and then see what those people think of this guy. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, don't worry, nothing on the wine club front changes. But just so that you folks know that I will no longer be in DC majority of the time. But you will still see me in DC. What's that?
I have a going away party.
It's actually happening this Friday. So I'm gonna henceforth, which is a new brewery / cocktail bar / wine bar that opened on H Street Northeast. If you guys remember Mike Spinello, he was like the Virginia wine expert from like 2020, 2021. Like he was our wine club member. Why he's opening his own place on H Street, and he just opened like a week ago. So we're gonna do it there on Friday. I will send out an email tomorrow. So if you guys can make it, come on by on Friday. Buy me a beer, buy me a wine, and then see what happens. But yeah, so that's all happening. Just giving you a heads up. Again, nothing changes on the wine club for you guys, but just yeah, 6 foot wine club goes up. So there you go. Last but not least, 6 foot wine club is committed to donating 1% of its gross revenue to an organization whose mission statement aligns with our values. And this month, I have chosen Beacon House. If you want to learn more about what they do, or if you want to donate alongside 6 foot wine club, the links are right there in the chat box. Check them out. And if you don't want to, that's totally fine too. I just want to give you an opportunity. Any questions about anything I just went over before we get into the wine? Excellent. Hearing none, let's get to the wine. And yes, for those of you who are just joining us now, this is a 1 liter bottle, because sometimes 750 just ain't enough. So we got right here, 2022 Cacique Maravilla Pipeno Vino Tinto País is what we're tasting today. In case that name Cacique Maravilla sounds familiar, it's because we've featured their wines before. We featured their naranja, which is their orange wine made of Muscat back in 2020, 2021. I can't remember what the first Chile box was, but it was a big hit, and it's still delicious. It's very good. But last time I featured Antoine Luyt's Pipeno, and we'll talk about him in a sec. He played a major role in making Pipeno kind of a global sensation that it is now. But we'll talk about that in a second. But I also think Cacique Maravilla's Pipeno is also delicious. So this time, I'm featuring his Pipeno. So there you go. That's what we're doing. All right, let's start with a map. That's what we always do. Here you go. So where are we? We're spending the entire this month in Chile. In case you're not familiar with what Chile is, I trust that all you smart DC folks are. I know we Americans are notoriously terrible with geography, but you all seem to be pretty good at it. Better than most, I should at least say. It's this really long, skinny country on the kind of the southwestern tip of South America is Chile, and that's where we are. To the east is obviously Argentina, or not obviously, but it is Argentina. And we did our Argentina month 3 months ago, And then we talked a lot about the Andes, which is the huge mountain range that runs down. It's basically what divides Chile and Argentina. So if you look at this map, this is what Chilean wine regions look like. But before we get into any of that, just kind of wanted to give you a little background on Chile. By the way, how many of you are, just out of curiosity, drink Chilean wines like regularly or drink a lot of Chilean wines? Do you ever drink Chilean wines?
Only
No.
pepinos.
Only what?
Only the pepinos.
Only the pepinos. Okay, fair.
We
And I
do.
pop into that
We drink
wine
some.
bar at Union Market, the over in the South American, themed
Yeah,
food court there. But that's basically it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm in their wine club too, Grand Cata.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And those are always, there's a lot
Yeah,
of
Grand Cata definitely has a lot of Chile. Yeah, for sure. Well, whether you're aware or not, Chile is a major producer in a global wine market. In fact, they are the 5th largest producing country in the world. So France being number 1, obviously, Italy, Spain, US being the 4th, and Chile is the 5th. So they make a lot of wine. But unfortunately, the most of it is this very much of a commodity, bulk, cheap Bordeaux blends. What I mean by Bordeaux blends, in case you're not familiar, what that means is Bordeaux is a region in France. And then what we're talking about is Cabernet, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. Those are like the 5 major grape varieties that go into a Bordeaux blend. And that's exactly what dominates just kind of the Chilean wine scene. And looking at that map, almost every region over there are 6 different wine producing regions within Chile. They all produce some of that. And none of that is essentially, it's not by accident. So by no accident. The French were kind of excited by this prospects of Chile's ideal climate, soils. I mean, Chile, talking about organic viticulture, this is almost a perfect place for viticulture. It's dry, it's got sandy soil. It is one of the best places to grow grapes on earth, and just for agriculture in general. So they invested heavily into Chilean market from the beginning, and they kind of identified those Bordeaux varieties to be the well-suited varieties. They planted it everywhere, starting with the Merlot and Cabernet and bringing the rest of the Bordeaux varieties, and then focus heavily on exports. And to this day, the big chunk of Chilean wines is export. It's not even the domestic consumption, but it's mostly being exported into US as well as into Europe. So oftentimes when you find Chilean wines in US, unless you have a shop like Grand Cata or these restaurants that we're lucky to have in DC, you're going to find them on the grocery shelves where they're selling really cheap, just Merlot, Cabernet, Syrah, as well as some what they thought was a Merlot at the beginning, but now it turned out they have their own grape variety called Carmenere. So you might have heard Carmenere. So that's kind of everywhere. But even before the French really came in and started planting their grape varieties, I mean, it was really the Spanish that first came here and kind of established viticulture. So it was the Franciscan monks, the Spanish missionaries, 1500s came here, and then they planted a lot of different kind of a mission grape, what they call criolla here. So one of things like Carignan, which is we have one of the bottles this week, and Pais, which is exactly what this wine is made from. Pais, by the way, is known as a Listan Prieto from Canary Islands, if you're familiar with that. But it is believed to originate from the Castile, Leon and Castile region, in the middle of Spain in the 16th century. But then none of that really exists there now. But the settlers from the Castile region brought those grapes to Canary Islands. So these days, if you're talking about Pais outside of Chile, we're really talking about Canary Islands. So Listan Prieto exists in Canary Islands mostly now, but depending on where you go in the New World, all these settlers from Spain that settled, you will see kind of evidence of these mission grapes. So in California and Mexico, Pais is called mission. So if you ever had these hipster, it's becoming very hip right now, these mission grape wines from California, that's Pais. Chile, they call it Pais. And in Argentina, they call it Criolla Chica. So these are all same grapes, but just know that they all came from Spain first. They're settled there, brought here by the missionaries in the 1500s. And all those grapes, the Pais or all Carignan as well as Muscat, all those are kind of in a group called a mission grapes because they just came with the missionaries. So they're as a group, they're just kind of a mission varieties. We'll talk more about Pais itself next week because the next week's wine is also made out of Pais. I'm intentionally focusing first 2 weeks on Pais because it wasn't until honestly that I tasted next week's Pais that I didn't realize that Pais could be that good. I've always had Pipeno, and I've always loved Pipeno for its really youthful, fresh, kind of easy to drink that consumption that we're talking about. But next week's wine, you're going to see that it is not only possible, but it is actually desirable to make Pais in a more quote unquote serious way. Like next week's wine is incredible. Like it's smoky, it's structured, it's deep. It's grown in this volcanic soil. You get this minerality popping out. It's crazy that these two are actually made from the exact same grapes. So I just want to start off with that. So we'll talk more about Pais next week. But talking about Chile, so sandwiched between the Pacific Ocean and the Andes Mountain, like I said, its position creates this massive, almost like an air conditioner effect. There's this huge ocean current that comes up northward from the Antarctica, right? The tip of this is basically the South Pole, Antarctica. So it comes up, and then all the wind that blows in, it blows all this cold air into inland. So it creates this really cool kind of climate, which is great for grape growing. Each Rhine region also, as you can see, it divides north to south, right, depending on where you are. But it also divides west to east because the west is obviously being close to the ocean coast. It's much lower in elevation, and before you going from west to east on this map, there's a little bit of another mountain range that runs through the middle, Cordillera, and it's not as high as the Andes, obviously. So there's another mountain range that kind of runs through in the middle. So there's a valley that exists between the Andes and that Cordillera. So that's in the middle, the inland valley. And then there's on the far east is basically going up against the slope hillside of the Andes. So not only does a country divide into north and south in terms of wine regions, but it also divides from west to east, going from the coast to the inland valley to the mountain slopes on the right. So just imagine how many different kind of permutations of all of that can create all these different microclimates and different terroir and different stylistic expressions. With all these different grape varieties that are also grown here. And these are kind of a part of the reason why Chile is fascinating. And then it's not just the Bordeaux varieties everybody thinks of. There's a lot of different styles of wine that come from here. So divide to 6 different regions going from the top to bottom. So on top, here's Atacama region up top. So yeah, Atacama, Coquimbo, these are kind of, and then Aconcagua, the highest peak, named after the highest peak on the Andes in South America, called Aconcagua. Central Valley region, Sur, which means south in Spanish, and then Austral is basically the 6 different regions within Chile. Up top, this is if you've ever been to Chile, you probably know this, but up here is where the desert is. This is the Atacama Desert. The Atacama Desert occupies almost 20% of the coastal Chilean coast, as well as 30% of its total land mass. So it's a gigantic desert that exists on the top of a north end of the country. It is also the driest place on earth. From what I read, they get 1 millimeter of rainfall per year. Yes, 1 millimeter. So it's less than Gobi Desert. I mean, it is the driest place on earth, which is pretty mind-boggling to think about. So that's up here as well. But here, as well as Coquimbo, a lot of what grows here, because that intense heat, a lot of wine production that happens here is for pisco production. So it's not necessarily for like a still wine, drinking wine, but it's more for making the base wine to make that Chilean pisco. So there you would see a lot of muscat being grown here, and white grape varieties. And as you move down to Aconcagua, so a little more central region here, there's 3 different sub-regions within it. You might have heard of these regions. They're actually quite familiar or famous, Casablanca Valley, San Antonio, as well as Aconcagua Valley. These yield some of the most coveted kind of Bordeaux style blends. So you're gonna find basically central here, you're gonna find a lot of Bordeaux varieties. I mean, this is some of the oldest. This is where the French first kind of settled, where the modern Chilean wine industry really settled in this region. So this is where the oldest wineries exist, and quote unquote also the best. So now as you go into the Central Valley, right next to Santiago, which is the capital, this was a wine industry where the Chile, first wine industry in Chile was set up. So consequently, the oldest, best sites and producers of fine wines in Chile are kind of located in the Central Valley area, particularly this right here. You've heard of this name if you drink Chilean wine or you've been to a lot of Chilean or Latin restaurants. Maipo Valley is probably the most well-known, most famous region for its fine quality wines. But also because the first wine industry was settled here, a lot of this is also, unsurprisingly, where they make a lot of cheap Bordeaux blends. A lot of commodity wines also come from here. So some of the best in the country, as well as the most bulk wine, also come here. It's kind of like Napa Valley, right? Like a lot of bulk wine come from Napa Valley, but some of the most well-known wineries in the country are also in Napa Valley. So, and then as you move south, and this, to me, this is where it gets really exciting in terms of Chile. This is where I'm finding a lot of different varieties, as well as experimentations, and also some of the oldest vines in the world are planted right here in this region of Chile. So Sur and Austral, these are the kind of sub-region, particularly right here, Itata Valley, which, where I go, Itata Valley. By the way, next week's wine comes from Itata Valley, and this week we're in Biobío Valley. So both the first 2 weeks of this month, we're spending it in the south region, or the Sur. So Itata here was once the center of the Chilean wine industry, especially right after the missionaries came, right before the French settled. This is where the oldest vines exist here. This is where the mission vines, the vineyards that missionaries planted have been around. And I don't know if you know this, but Chile is only one of the only few countries, if not the only country in the world, that has never been affected by what's called phylloxera. So there was this disease that almost wiped out like almost all 90+% of the European vineyards in 1800s, and it's called phylloxera. It's a root louse disease that these little tiny little bugs essentially that eat the Vitis vinifera, which is the grapevine plant, from the roots and kill it. And then they wiped out more than 90% of grapevines in all through Europe, and it came from North America. So the settlers came to North America, took some of the vines and brought it back to Europe. And turns out the American rootstock of the grapevines are resistant to phylloxera. So the American vines are totally fine, but the Vitis vinifera European grapevines were not resistant to this phylloxera, so they wiped out the entire vineyards. So the solution to that was they had to go back and get the American rootstock, bring it back to the Europe, and then graft the European grapevines on top of the American rootstock. So the majority of the world right now, any wine producing regions you go in the world, they don't go beyond 1800s or late 1800s, because that's when phylloxera wiped out everything. And most wines are not own rooted. They're all rooted on American rootstock or the European grapevines grafted on top of it. However, Chile is one of the few countries, because it's a sandy soil and because it's dry and the climate and all of that, it was never affected by phylloxera. So it's one of the few places in the world where you have own rooted grapevine stock that dates more than 200+ years. So some of the oldest vines in the world are found right here, and mostly they're found right here in Sur and Austral region. But unfortunately, with the French coming in, all those international varieties like Cabernet and Merlot growing here, all these Pais and all these old mission vineyards and vines are being uprooted. They're being pulled out and being replaced with Cabernet and Merlot, all these new varieties. or if anything, they are just being blended into a big bulk, just kind of a red wine blend, and not really paying any attention to what they could do with these grapes. And all of that is found right here. But there's a whole movement now, especially amongst the young kind of natural winemakers who are coming to this region and then rediscovering these really old vineyards and reinvigorating and making wines from these kind of indigenous mission varieties that came here along with the missionaries. And this is exactly that kind of example of that. And that's found almost all right here in the South region. So pretty exciting place to keep your eye out on. A lot of kind of most traditional, old kind of a winemaking, all of that will come from this region. So if you are into Chilean wines, I say, and go out there and then kind of seek out some of the wines that come from the Sur or the Austria region, because this is where you're going to find some of the kind of the final frontier. Even though it is the oldest part, right? It's the most OG part of Chile, but it's just now it's becoming like a new and hot thing, just because it was just forgotten about for a long time. And it's coming back in. And Biobío, where we are right here, is named after this river, Biobío River, that runs through here to Concepcion. It's a haven for natural wine enthusiasts. I mean, there's just a lot of natural winemaking that's happening here. A lot of traditional winemaking that just never changed over time is happening here. A lot of young people are coming back there and then saying, we're going to move away from the industrial winemaking that's happening up in Central Valley or Aconcagua. And then I'm going to go back to these oldest vineyards in the country and make wines the way our ancestors used to make. And a lot of that movement is happening right here in Biobío Valley and as well as in Tata Valley. So check it out. But this is where we are, just for all intents and purposes for today. We are right here in Biobío Valley. So let's talk about who makes this wine. This guy with that unbelievably amazing mustache is the winemaker. His name is Manuel Moraga Gutierrez. By the way, he's a phenomenally kind and very gregarious and friendly man. I've met him a couple of times, and he's fantastic. So if you ever get a chance to go down there and visit him, or if you ever go to like a wine fair or a chance to meet him, I highly recommend you meet him because he's amazing. He's a character. He's a seventh generation of his family to manage the vineyards. And these vineyards have been in his family since 1750, to give you an idea of how long they've been making wine. Manuel's great grandfather, Francisco Gutierrez Gutierrez, arrived in Chile in 1750 from the Canary Islands, like I mentioned, in search of gold and eventually amassed enough money, gold, I guess, to acquire land in Yumbel, which is a town that this Cacique Maravilla is in, some of which is still owned by the family and Manuel himself today. Francisco earned the respect of the local indigenous Mapuche people, was given the nickname Cacique Maravilla. That's what this winery is named after, which roughly translates to magnificent chief in Spanish. The Gutierrez family has been tending vines in Yumbel for generations since 1750, like I said. But Manuel, this guy, is the first one in his family to actually bottle and sell the wine. So before, the family was just only growing grapes, or they were making wine, but they're selling in bulk to other producers to blend. But he was the first one in his family to bottle it and sell it. He farms 16 hectares now, completely chemical-free. We're working with only the indigenous grape varieties, all pre-phylloxera, own-rooted vines of old vine Pais, Moscatel de Alejandría, Torontel, and Corinto. They're all, some of them are well over 200 years old. So we're talking about very, very old vine grape varieties. And in case you're wondering, like, why does it matter? Why do you want, like, why do old vines, like, why do you care about the vines being so old? So what happens with, I mean, not only is it cool that there are vines that are that old still producing grapes, right? And you're making wine from 200-year-old vines. But what happens is that as the vines get older, their yield goes down. They can't produce as much. But when the yield goes out on fruit, what is it with the grapevine, is that a lot of concentration happens because a lot of the energy of the vines just get concentrated into those few grapes that are left there. So it's like as you get older, you become wiser and drop, you make fewer grape, you yield less grape, but like they're better, they're wiser and sweeter and better. It's kind of the idea. So the wines that are often made from old vines just tend to be more concentrated, have more complexity and all of that. So that's part of the reason why we care that these pre-flux are our own rooted 20-plus-year-old thing. So here's a fun story. So one of the things, he's kind of a darling of natural wine, natty wine movement, because he not only farms completely chemical free, but he's also completely chemical free in the cellar. So he doesn't use sulfites at all. Sulfites is a substance. I mean, you see it on every bottle. It says contains sulfites. It's a naturally occurring substance in any fermented thing. So cheese, charcuterie, wine, beer, everything that's fermented has sulfites. But in the winery setting, in the cellar, they often use it as an antiseptic to kind of kill all bacteria. It kills everything, just kind of quote unquote to stabilize the wine. So oftentimes winemakers will put sulfites anywhere between, when the grapes first come into the cellar all the way to right before bottling or during aging. They use sulfites to kind of kill off all the bacteria so the wine is stable. The downside of all of that is that sulfites kills good bacteria as well as bad bacteria. So it just kills off everything. So when we're working with the wines, what we call natural wine, which is the wines that have no kind of addition or intervention from the outside. So all the yeast that we use are found only on the skins. We're not pitching any lab-grown yeast out to these wines. And he's not even, oftentimes a lot of producers that we feature, they'll do the spontaneous fermentation, which is a fermentation using only the native yeast. And at the end, they'll just use a little bit of sulfites right before bottling just to stabilize the wine. But some of these kind of really gung-ho, hardcore natural winemakers will not even put sulfites. So, I mean, it's just like there's no safety net there. It's like whatever happens, you're just hoping that you've grown healthy enough grapes with a healthy enough population of microbes and yeast that they can fight each other off and then keep themselves stable. It's kind of the idea of making these kind of what we call 0-0 wine. So 0 input in the vineyards, 0 input in the cellar. And this is a 0-0 wine. So there's no sulfites, there's no chemicals in the vineyards, there's nothing added to this thing. If you ever see a nutrition label in the back of this wine, all it will say is literally grapes. So it's a very honest, kind of raw kind of wine, and he's always believed in that. But how he arrived there is actually a pretty funny story, but it's also driven out of tragedy. So Manuel's first vintage was in February 27th, 2010. First vintage coincided with earthquake in Chile on February 27th, 2010. It was one of the worst in Chile's history. The winery, as well as much of his machinery, everything just got completely destroyed during the earthquake. But he still managed to harvest grapes. He still managed to make wine that year. But he had no equipment. He had nothing else. So he had to go back to this very traditional way of destemming fruits through these bamboo mats, which is what the Chilean people do, and then putting in these big, gigantic barrels and foot stomping it. By the way, this is pais. Foot stomping it and then fermenting it in this gigantic kind of open top fermenters called Rowley. These are all made of beech wood, by the way, local beech wood. And just putting it in here and then letting it ferment. Not because he believed in this crazy natural wine philosophy, but because he had no other means. But then he realized the wine that was made from after all of that, he actually liked the wine quite a bit. And then he realized he didn't need all this shit to make wine. So he's like, you know what? From now on, I'm going to make wine this way. And it's just always going to be that way. So turns out the earthquake destroying all of his equipment and the property was actually a good thing, because now he's like the darling child of the natural wine movement in Chile because of his philosophy. But yeah, so this is how it's made here. The wine here is that 100% pais grown without any kind of chemical intervention and all of that. Vineyard was planted in 1776. Obviously, not all the vines are planted since 1776, but the vineyard where they come from have been there since 1776. Destemmed and fermented in open rowley, which are these things. These are all basically foot stomp, basically. These are as rustic and what we think of as like old school winemaking as possible. They basically destem it and then they stomp on it, foot stomp on it, and then they just let it ferment in this like a gigantic thing. And then as soon as it stops fermenting, they basically dry it off and then let it rest in a smaller beechwood barrels called pipas. And then that's where I couldn't get a good picture of pipas, by the way. I'll try to find one next week. And by the way, that's where the name Pipeno comes from. It's a pipa is the name of the vessel that this is aged in. And then it's fermented for a short amount of, I mean, it's aged there for a short amount of time. Then it's bottled without filtering, without fining, and without any sulfites. So, and that's essentially what you have here. So if you think of it, and I said this before, Pipeno is kind of like the most quintessential, uniquely Chilean wine. Like you are not going to find Pipeno anywhere else. It's not meant for, it's oftentimes made from blend of mission grapes varieties, mostly Pais, but you can, I've seen some with some Carignan thrown in there. I've seen some with a Moscato and some other white grapes also thrown in there. It's kind of field blend of all the kind of mission varieties that are grown. And then it can be red, it can be white, and any shade of rosé in between. So Pipeno does not necessarily mean that it is always going to be red. Pipeno just means it's also not a government regulated term. So Pipeno just talks about it's a stylistic choice of a wine. So it's just that kind of rustic, artisanal table wine made from like a countryside for kind of the whole village. Is kind of the whole idea of what Pipeno is. These are what a lot of farmers used to drink when they're working. It's kind of similar thing as the closest thing that I can think of to Pipeno is Beaujolais Nouveau, right? It's like a freshly made, freshly fermented. As soon as it's done fermenting, it's matured, aged for just a short amount of time, and it's put out for people to drink. No fuss and whatnot. And it would be amiss if I didn't mention these two names, because without these two people, Pipeno, we probably would not be drinking Pipeno. This will still probably be the only thing that you find in a very deep countryside of Chile. But in general, the Pipeno was always there, right? It's like one of the things that have always been uniquely Chilean, that have always existed traditionally in Chilean culture, in the viticulture. But with the 20th century, with the peak of the French varieties coming in, kind of the fervor or the popularity for Pipeno and the Pais completely dropped off. But there were these two people, and ironically, they're both French dudes that kind of brought Pipeno back into fashion. And one of them is Louis-Antoine Luyt. We featured his wine. We featured his Pipeno in the last Chile bought. French dude, Burgundy bred, mentored by the great Marcel Lapierre, talking about natural wine. So in 2007, he made his mission to discover these kind of old vineyards in this part of Chile, and in making wine using only the traditional methods that I was telling you about, that kind of bamboo mat stemming, foot stomping, making in the rowley. And then his wines hit the Paris natural wine bar scene and took off. And then he opened up this huge export market for Pipeno for not only France, for the rest of the world, really. And then there's another guy named David Marcel. In 2012, he also opened to make this kind of light, juicy style of Pipeno. And then he sold them in beer bottles. His wines are much harder to find in the US. I've seen his wines in France, but I haven't seen them in the US. But his Pipenos come in a beer bottle, again, just to make it easy to kind of sell, market it as like the easy to drink, chill it, drinking like a beer kind of idea. So David Marcel, Louis-Antoine Luyt, those are the names. Whenever you are reaching for a bottle of Pipeno, know that these two guys, these two French dudes, were kind of the ones who made it possible for us to be talking about Pipeno in the US or the rest of the world. So anyways, that's that. Any questions about anything I just went over? I've been talking for a while. Any questions before we get into tasting?
I have a question. So what I like about like these really old vines coupled with like the low intervention you're talking about, is this more or less what you think the wine would have tasted like when they made it 200 years ago? Because it is so just basic and old school. They're just throwing in a barrel, crushing it, and fermenting it.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that this is as close as it gets, right? Like it's just like there's nothing, there's no makeup on this thing. It's just literally grapes, fermented grape juice that's coming out. No treatment. There's no secondary aging that's happening here. And it's the same way. It's not like also the production method changed at all. So
Right.
yes, to answer your question, I would think that, yeah, it's very similar to how they used to taste.
Because when you think about these like classics from like France, like they've been changing in France, they've been changing their technique, continuously for so long. It's like, well, maybe this is how it tasted, but with this is like genuinely how they would have probably tasted the wine when they first
Exactly.
made it 100
Yeah.
years ago.
Excellent point. Yeah, I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah, I think you're totally right. Like this is probably much closest thing to actually tasting something that people would drink 200 plus years ago. For sure.
It's cool. I like it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Carmenere from Chile.
Yeah.
Where is that grown? Is that grown in this same area or?
It's grown kind of
Exactly.
everywhere. So the Bordeaux varieties are pretty much grown everywhere. Less so here down in the Sur and then more south you go, but anywhere above that, basically going from the Aconcagua, the Central Valley, that area, there's Carmenere grown everywhere. But even going up all the way up north to Atacama and all that, you'll find some Carmenere as well. And also because of that west to east difference, because like the west is right along the coast, that's where all the cold air comes in. So it's the coolest part. Well, depending on the elevation as well, east, but it's much cooler. The inland, the valley, is the warmest part of Chile, right between Cordillera and the Andes. And then going up on the mountain on the east, I guess again, depending on the elevation, the temperature could change as well. But it's much more infertile soil as well. That happens on that side as well. So because of that, right, like not only the north and south, but you can also pick like as you go more south, it gets colder, but you can pick the inland, the middle part, or as more in the southern part of it, and then where it gets warm enough that you can go Carmenere, right? Or even if you go more north and it gets hotter, but you can pick the coastal plain to grow things like Pinot Noir, which is a cool climate, right? So if you look at Chile, you kind of find the varieties grown in almost all parts, but again, because of that north to south, west to east difference, there's different pockets that like microclimates that are created in all these different pockets, and that's kind of what's cool about Chile. Any other questions?
Yeah, what kind of elevations are we talking? The same as when we were doing Argentina?
No, it doesn't get that high. I'll pull up a picture next. Actually, I might have it here. Actually, hold on. Yeah, I'll bring up the picture next week. But average elevation is here lower in Chile than Argentina. Definitely along the coast, much lower. Yeah. Any other questions? Excellent. Let's taste the wine. And this being the first week, I'm going to go through the wine for Todd. All right. Let's start from the top. So this is the grid, and we taste wine through the grid here at 6 Foot Wine Club. It's not the end all be all. Just use it as a loose guide to tasting wine. Don't hang your tasting on all this. But this is basically how the wine professional, how we are trained to taste wine. And then keep in your mind, this is for like a blind tasting exam setting. So oftentimes we're going into exam, we get a glass, we don't know what wine's in there. And by going through this thing, we're supposed to get enough information by the end of it that we can call out what's in the glass, whether it's ageable, what quality it is, and all that stuff. So we are using WSET, it stands for Wine Spirit Education Trust, level 3 grid. You can type this in Google, you'll find it, it's all free. There are different levels, but we're using level 3. And it's divided into 4 different sections. So there's the appearance, what the wine looks like, nose, what the wine smells like, palate, what the wine tastes like. We'll taste for flavor as well as a structure. We'll talk about that when we get there. And then conclusion is when you take all this information from the first 3, put it all together, think about it, and talk about, and then end on how good the wine is or whether it's ageable. Basically the idea. So I'll walk you through all of it, but also know that this is very, very limiting in some ways, especially because this is meant for more of a conventional wine. So a lot of these kind of natural wines that we're talking about, because of that wild yeast and no sulfites and everything, oftentimes there are these kind of smells, aromas, and flavor that are not sometimes in these things. Also, if you look at the second page, which is these are the kind of the vocabulary that we're supposed to use to describe wine. In an exam setting, if you use any other description or words besides what's on here, we don't get a point. So they want you to describe wine using the words that are on here. But as you can see, like these are not all the fruits and flowers in the world, you know? And also, if you grew up in different parts of the world and you grew up with breadfruit from Jamaica, right? Or durian in South America, or whatever it may be, you may have grown up with a complete different set of aromas and flavors than what these British body of wine education, which is WSET, and what they put here as how we should describe wine. So it is very limited. It's not that this is not right. It's more of like it's right for who, right? It's right for the very Western European centric ways of looking at interpreting wine. But that's all to say, if you get certain aromas or flavors that remind you of something that you grew up with that may not be on here, you're not wrong. Just trust your senses, your palate, and then call out things that come to you, because just because it's on here does not mean you're wrong. So that's all I want to say. All right, but let's go through the top to bottom. And by the way, this is the first week, so it's going to take a little bit of time. I'll go through and kind of explain how these things work. But starting next week, we'll actually call on each one of you to take one section, and then we're going to do this. That's how we get better with practice, right? So appearance. So pour yourself like a half a glass of wine, like 2 to 3 ounces of wine. And then you're going to tilt the glass at like 45-degree angle, like this. Natural light, sunlight is always the best, but obviously we don't have that at this time of the night. But you're trying to look through, and if you have like a white piece of paper, that's great to put behind it. If not, like a palm always works as well. But kind of look through the deepest core of the wine. And the first thing we're going to talk about is clarity. And I'd say this wine, for intents and purposes, this wine is clear. I won't go as far as calling this hazy. But I can tell that this wine has not been filtered, right? Like it's not fully cloudy and hazy, but like that this wine it's not translucent. And some of the wines that you will see, particularly the conventional ones that have been fined and filtered, are very, very clear, translucent. And this is not that. So but this intense, and this again, natural wine versus conventional wine. For all intents and purposes, I'll say this one is clear, but I'll just note that this has not been filtered. I can tell this has not been filtered. Intensity. So look through the deepest core, and if you can kind of completely read through for a red wine, you can read through and see all the letters behind. You can like read a letter, then that's pale. Medium is that you can kind of tell that there are letters behind, but you can't really like fully read it. That's medium. Deep is when completely opaque and you can't see it. And I would say this is about, I don't know, medium medium minus, somewhere around there. I can kind of see my keyboard letters through the deepest core of my wine, but I can't like read a card or letter through this. So I'm gonna call this about medium minus. Color. I'm gonna call this ruby, but there's a little bit of like orange kind of a hue to it. But for intensives, I'm gonna call this ruby. Any other observation? We're not, you know, I don't see depots in my glass. I don't see any bubbles. And all of you veterans are gonna hear this for the 100th time, if not the 1000th time, but legs or tears. So we don't really talk about legs or tears, just so you know what those are. So if you give it a swirl, and if you let it just kind of sit, you see these kind of droplets that are coming down on the side of the glass. Those are called legs or tears. And what it tells you is the viscosity of the wine. And the viscosity of the wine is determined by, it's a function of sugar and alcohol, right? Higher the sugar, the thicker it becomes, like syrup, right? Slower that legs move, right? Higher the alcohol, more glycol, the slower it moves. So all of that. But what I find unnecessary is that later on when we get the palate, we are going to verify sweetness as well as alcohol. So I don't really know why they want you to talk about legs or tears and take a guess game of what's happening, but for some reason they want us to. And also, I've heard this so many times as somebody who's worked on restaurant floor, people talking about like, oh my God, such gorgeous legs or tears. It must be a great wine. Like, you sound like an idiot, so don't do that. Like, legs or tears have nothing to do with the quality of wine. It just tells you the viscosity of the wine, okay? So we're not going to talk about legs or tears because it's stupid or it's a waste of time. All right, nose. So now we're going to smell it. Give it a little swirl. And you can put your nose in the glass. You can take a one big, like a slow whiff, or you can take a few shorter ones. Do which one's right for you. I tend to be slower, kind of long, kind of a sniffer. So, all right. So, first of all, I would say this wine is sound. There's nothing wrong with this wine. Is this wine clean? I wouldn't say that, right? Like, you can tell there's a lot of, nice way of saying this, there's a lot of rusticity in this wine, right? Like, you know that this was made in somebody's farmhouse. This is not made in some place that has like a stainless steel tank that looks like a clean lab. Looks like somewhere where it's made in that kind of open top, gigantic, fermenter that we saw in the picture, like, right? Because like, so it's not off, but I wouldn't say this one's clean. There's a little bit of like it's a little dirty, and I like it though. I think it gives it the personality, but definitely. And this is again that what I find limiting about this grid is that like it's not really meant for tasting natural wine like this, right? Like, but I'll say this one is sound. This one is, but a little dirty. Intensity. So give it a swirl. And then you're going to move the wine towards your nose and see when you start smelling aromas. To me, like here. So it's like literally just off the glass, not quite touching the glass, but like literally just off, less than an inch off the glass. So whenever your nose is like touches the glass or just off the glass, I'll call that medium. If you call your nose in the glass, you're smelling it, you can't really get stuff out. That's medium minus. Light is really like you can't smell, like you can't tell anything. Medium plus is when you're a few inches above, like 2 to 3 inches off the glass, and pronounced is further. Like we're talking 4 to 5 inches off the glass. But like right now, if I were to give it a swirl and start moving, like right there, and it's just off the rib. So I'm gonna call that medium. So medium intense aromas of. Now what do we got? And don't overthink this. Just go down from the top to bottom. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, you don't get it. Right? So first, let's start with floral. Do you get any floral? Not like hugely floral. Maybe I can be convinced that there's a little bit like a rose petals here, but no, mostly not much. Green fruit, not much for me. Citrus fruit, not much for me here either. Stone tropical, not really. Red fruit, yes, I get red fruit here. I get some currant, I get some cranberries here, I get a little red cherry, even red plum, ton of red fruit that's running through here. I do also get a little bit of black fruit, like just touch of black fruit, mostly red fruit. This is like 90% red fruit, but like some black fruit here, some black plum, some sort of like black cherry kind of a thing going on here as well. Something like brambly, but like red fruit to me, the red currant, the cranberry, the red plum, all that is what's coming out here. Nature of the fruit. I would say this is mostly fresh, really ripe, but there's also some like dried fruit kind of thing going on here. It's not necessarily just the fruit itself, but I get like dried hay, some sort of like a chamomile kind of a thing. Maybe that's what I was getting on like on this floral thing up top. That's some sort of like a dried grass, hay, tea leaves, chamomile, kind of dry kind of thing going on here as well. Any herbaceous? I do get a little bit of herbaceous here too. Like nothing too much, but like again, kind of dry. This goes back to kind of the like the leafy green, but like dried hay kind of a thing going on here. Maybe touch up this kind of like a minty medicinal kind of thing, but mostly herbaceous. Touch of spice. I get like a little bit of pepper, peppermill. And then not a whole lot of like a minerality, at least on the nose. Maybe a little bit of like the smokiness, like a touch of smokiness. But all in all, really, mostly what I'm getting is a red fruit with a touch of that kind of like the dried hay, some sort of like savory hay kind of a thing going on. Dry plant matter, a tobacco leaf maybe, kind of thing going on here. Secondary, nope, I don't get much secondary here. By the way, yeast, we're going to talk about this quite a bit when we get to like so really wines that are aged on lees, which are dead yeast cells. Those give off what's called autolytic flavors, autolytic aromas, and this is what happened, like biscuit, bread, toast, pizza dough, things like that pop out. MLF is a malolactic fermentation. This is where this is a naturally occurring phenomenon. If you leave the wine alone at room temperature, every wine will go through secondary fermentation called malolactic fermentation. Almost all red wines go through it, and some white wines go through entire malolactic fermentation. Some go partial, some get completely blocked. That all depends on the winemaker's choice. But think malic acid in the wine. This is when the malic acid in the wine converts to lactic acid, and this happens naturally. So malic acid, think like green apples, really sharp, jagged acid. Lactic acid, think like lactose, so think like yogurt, sour cream. They're still both tart and sour, but they're very different in terms of what helps me is thinking of as a shape. Like malic acid is like pointy and sharp, and lactic acid is like round and elongated, and it feels different when you're talking about that. And oftentimes when you've heard of like a buttery Chardonnay, creamy kind of a wine, this is what happens when it goes through a full malolactic fermentation. Yes, some of that. And admittedly, I am terrible at picking up malolactic fermentation on the nose. I usually pick up MLF on the palate, but I am notoriously terrible at picking up MLF on the nose. Oak. This is what we're talking about, is mostly new oak, but you can get some in an old oak, like used oak barrels. But when the wine has been aged in oak barrels, new oak barrels, you get these kind of what's called warming spices, baking spices, so things like vanilla, cloves, nutmeg, coconut. These things are just kind of signals for us wine people to signal to each other, like I get new oak with this wine. So kind of what we do. So yeah, so primaries are all the flavors and aromas that come from the fermentation or the fruit itself. Secondaries are what happens after the wine is done fermenting, what you do, like post-fermentation treatment. So if you put it in new oak barrels, these are the flavors you get. If you let it go through malolactic fermentation, these are the kind of things you get. If you let it sit on the dead yeast cells and these are the kind of flavors and aromas you get. So these are all about post-fermentation. And then finally, tertiary is what happens when the wine has been aged, mostly in bottles, but it can be in vessels as well. So aged wines, this is when all the primaries start turning, so fresh fruit and flowers will start to dried fruit that will start to become like fig, prune, dry blackberries and things like that. Also, if it's been deliberately, there's oxidative effect on the wine, which means that just you expose a wine to oxygen during winemaking or during aging. you get things like almond, marzipan, nutty kind of a finish. Think like Madeira or Oloroso sherry, right? And then finally, some of these are all bottle aging. You start getting things like petrol or kerosene, particularly present in old Riesling, as well as if you go to old red wines, you'll see things, all those primary fruit will start turning to non-fruit flavors like leather, forest floor, earth, mushroom, game, tobacco, things like that. So, but knowing the age of this wine and how freshly this was made, I don't see much of secondary and tertiary here. I mean, maybe tobacco that I'm getting here because this is not meant to be aged for a long time. Pipeno is never meant to be aged for a long time. Pipeno is meant to be consumed young and fresh. So maybe that kind of tobacco, dried hay kind of a thing that I'm talking about is maybe some of tertiary already starting to peek in. But really, for all intents and purposes, this wine, mostly, we're still right here. This wine is still very much fresh, pretty much a primary driven wine. All right, let's get to palate. By the way, we don't really talk about development. We don't go through all that much, but just so you know what this means, youthful means all the aromas and flavors are pretty much on the primary. Developing is you start to see the secondary and tertiary start to come in. Fully developed means that there's like a perfect balance between primary and tertiary, none of it taking over, or tertiary hasn't taken over yet. Tired and past is best is when you've lost a lot of the primary and you no longer have fresh fruit left in the wine, and all you get are these kind of non-fruit flavors. So yes, it is possible to age the wine too long. There's such thing as past its peak in terms of wine aging. All right, let's finally get to palate. So start from the top, give it a little swirl, take a sip, move it around your mouth, like Listerine the shit out of your mouth. Like it's as if you're like going to bed, you're doing like a mouth rinse. Cover every inch of your mouth. All right, let's start from the top. Sweetness. Dry means lack of sugar. Sweet means presence of sugar. By the way, when we're talking about sweetness, we're talking about all the wines that are ever produced in the world. And just to give you a hint, like 95% of the time, 95% of wines produced in the world are dry. And unfortunately, there's no like scientific cutoff. I wish there was like dry 0 to 10 grams per liter. That's how we measure sugar. And in wine, grams per liter. Off dry is like 10 to 15, but it's not like that. There's a lot of perception that plays here as well. But oftentimes dry is usually around up to about like 10 grams per liter, 9 to 10 grams per liter. Most humans cannot detect sugar below 5 grams per liter, but maybe you are very sensitive and you can detect sugar on the wines. But most wines are below under 10 grams per liter. So for all intents and purposes, majority of the wine in the world are made in dry. Off dry, you will be able to see some actual residual sugar going to 10, 15 grams. Medium dry, by this point, we're, at least to American standard, we're already talking about very much of a sweet dessert wine. Medium sweet, we get into probably like 30, 35 grams per liter sweet. And just to give you an idea, luscious, some of the highest level of sugar dessert wines, like Tokaj, Hungarian dessert wine called Tokaj, those got up to like 350, some will get up to like 500 grams per liter, just to give you an idea of how sweet these things can be. But for intents and purposes, this wine, for this week, this wine is dry. Acidity, move it around and see where you feel acidity. For me, it's the back of my jaws. I feel like most people feel their acidity in the back of their jaws, but some people feel it in their sinus, some people feel it between their eyebrows, and see how tart, how much pulling a sensation that is, or how much you salivate after you spit or you swallow it. It's got some acid, right? Got some tartness here. I'm gonna call this medium plus just to help you calibrate your senses. Like lower in the medium plus, I'm gonna go full into medium plus, but it's got good acid, which is fantastic. Keeps it really vibrant. I'm gonna call this lower medium plus, and tannin. So move it all around. You're gonna feel it's kind of a little bit of friction, grip. If you ever want to experience tannin, take like 2 bags of green tea, steep it, make your green tea, and then afterwards go like suck on that bag and just feel what that feels like in your mouth. Is so tannin is a polyphenolic compound found in skin, seeds, and stems of the grapevines, where it gives you this kind of drying sensation in your mouth. And this wine definitely has a little bit of it. It's not a whole lot, but definitely has it. I feel it. I feel it all in my gum. This is like, to me, like medium minus to medium, somewhere like lower end of medium, higher end of medium minus. Yeah, maybe I'll call that medium. The fact that like Pipeno, something this youthful, meant to be consumed young, has this kind of like structural or textural element of tannin is kind of nice, actually. It's not just like a pound juice. But yeah, I'm gonna call this like a medium, lower end of medium. Alcohol, take a sip, spit it out, watch how warm your throat gets, and start playing this game of guessing the alcohol percentage on your wine. It's kind of a fun game. After a while, you get pretty good at it. You'll get down to like the 0.5 percentage. So just to give you an idea, medium is like 12 to 13.5%. Medium plus is like 13.5 to 14.5. High is 15%. Medium minus is like 10 to 12%, 11.5, and anything below 10% is called low. So kind of calibrate your senses. To me, this doesn't feel all that high. Maybe like, I don't know, 12%, 12.5 max, 11.9. So yeah, this is like right on the lower end of medium. Could call this medium minus. I'm gonna call this medium, 12%. It's kind of right in there. So lower end of medium is where I'm gonna call this an alcohol. But again, yeah, getting the practice of just kind of guessing the alcohol percentage and kind of calibrate. So this is what 11.9 feels like on my body. Next time you taste wine and it feels warmer, you know that it's higher than that. And by the way, the alcohol can also, depending on the rest of what's in the wine, like I've had 10.5% wine that feels out of balance. The alcohol seems so hot. I've also had 14.5, 15.5% wines that felt in balance. It all depends on what else is going on with the wine, but at least in an objective sense, trying to see if you can guess the alcohol percentage. Body. This is where I'm going to make a milk analogy. Take a sip, move it around your mouth. Don't pay attention to flavor. Don't pay attention to the tartness. Just pay attention to the viscosity, the weight of the wine. Move it around your mouth. And the analogy I gave is medium is like 2%. Imagine like you're swishing like 2% milk in your mouth. Full is whole milk, and then skim milk is light. And if you're ever wondering, if you haven't switched different percentage of milk in your mouth in your lifetime, I would say, what are you doing with your life in the first place? So go out there and switch different percentage milk around. But yeah, so move it around to see what that feels like. Doesn't seem all that big to me, right? I'm gonna call this like, I don't know, 1%, like medium minus medium, somewhere in that range is what I'll call this. Like not super, like medium minus. Yeah, so medium minus body is what I call this. Mousse, we don't have to talk about mousse because it's not a sparkling wine. Flavor intensity. Yeah, this is how strong are the flavors? How intensely are you tasting the flavors? And to me, this comes off as kind of like on the nose. It's like about medium, like just, yeah, it's not like super intense, but it's not shy either. I'm not like struggling to get the flavors out. So I'll call that about medium. And then finally for the palate, for the flavor component, this is where you just kind of confirm everything that you smelled on the nose. and then if there's anything else that pops out to you, and whatnot on this wine. This kind of like that chamomile, maybe dry. Yeah, actually, I'm not gonna go chamomile. Maybe like a rose petal, maybe some dry rose petals, sure. But really nothing here. Again, all that red fruit that I told you about, I get all of that. Red plum, red cherry, red currant, cranberry, all of that. Touch of black fruit. The fruit is fresh and it's ripe. The fruit itself, I think, is fresh and ripe. And what I get is that, again, like maybe you get, I keep talking about like the tobacco leaf or dried hay, but there's something about like a dried plant matter kind of a thing going on here, with a touch of spice, a little bit like kind of smoke going on here as well. One thing, so I'm confirming everything that I got in the nose. One thing I do get here that I didn't necessarily get on the nose, because you can, is there's a bit of a salinity here. There's a touch of salt on this wine, which is another sign of kind of minerality and different things going on. So I get a little bit of brininess at the end. Not a whole lot. There's saltier wines than this out there, but there definitely I get a little bit of salt, which is a nice little surprise. Nothing secondary here, nothing tertiary. Yes, tobacco is down here, but I don't think it's really a function of a bottle age. It's 2022. Sure, it's 3 years, but it's not that long. Yeah, so I'm gonna go with everything pretty much in the primary, with a bit like a dry kind of a thing. Finish, finally. Take a sip, sit with the flavors, see how long you continue to taste the flavors. Right about there. I'll call it about medium as well. Also, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. I have a feeling that this wine's going to get mousy. It's going to fall off. So I'm starting to get a little bit of that mouse at the end already, like just a gerbil starting to like peek through. So I recommend that you all drink this tonight, unless actually save a little bit for tomorrow and then come back to it tomorrow, just so that you know what mouse smells and tastes like. And we'll talk about that at the end after we're done with all the tasting.
Hey, I opened this at 6:45. You guys should get to work.
Yeah, it's a game mousy. Okay.
It was mousy by 8:45, like 2 hours. This is a true 0-0 wine.
All right, so you got 2 hour window.
You guys have like 15 minutes left to drink the rest of this liter, and I will tell you, it is not an improvement. The mouse is coming. Yeah,
the mouse is coming
for real.
Yeah, I mean, I just got that. I didn't even get it at the first when we started the tasting portion, the palate portion earlier. But now when I got to finish, I'm like, oh wait,
I left it uncorked, so I could have. I guess I should have known, but I keep putting it back in the fridge because I'm like, oh man.
yeah. You got to drink it now. Yeah. All right, folks. You got a liter bottle and you got 2 hour window. Yeah, that felt like quick. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll get there. Let me just finish up this conclusion and we'll talk over mouse and what we're talking about. So finally, conclusion, this is when you put everything together. So quality level is a function of 4 things: balance, complexity, concentration, and length. So let's go over what we're talking about. Balance. Is this wine balanced? Meaning, is there anything in this wine that is so overpowering and overwhelming that it kind of interferes with you experiencing other things? I would say no. Everything here seems to be way in balance. So it seems harmonious. So I would say balanced. Concentration. We called it medium on the nose, medium on the palate. So medium concentration. Complexity. We call it a few things in the primary, right? Maybe some dry fruit, dry flower, mostly all red fruit, touch of black, little spice, little dried hay, not much, maybe touch of minerality, no secondary, no tertiary. So that's also kind of like medium, I'll call that. And then finally the length, we also call it medium. So when you take average of all those things, we're kind of landing in medium, right? So when that average is medium, we call it good. When the average is medium plus, we call it very good. When that average is pronounced or high, full, we call it outstanding. And then when that average is medium minus, we call it acceptable. When that average is low, we call it poor, faulty. There's something wrong with the wine. So for this wine, that average being medium, we're gonna call this good. Now, level of readiness for drinking and potential for aging. In order for wines to age, there are two things that have to be present. It's a structural component and a flavor component. And each one of those components subdivides further into two subcomponents. So let's first talk about structural component. So structural component, what you need is either tannin or acid. With this wine, we had a medium plus acid is what we called it. So decent medium acidity. And then the tannin, we called it what, lower in the medium, higher in the medium minus, so not so high. So okay, that's an okay backbone. Basically, structural, the tannin acid, what they serve is the backbone. It's like the strong vertebra. So all the flavors can stick to it and doesn't fall apart. So this has a decent backbone, not super long. And then the flavor is the concentration and complexity. Concentration, we call it medium on the nose, medium on the palate. Again, decent, not terrible, but not great. It's not medium plus or pronounced. And then complexity, we have some in the primary, but we don't have the secondary, tertiary. So a lot of that, the concentration, we need to have a lot of it present. So some of can remain as a primary while the others convert to a non-primary tertiary flavors. So you can have balance, of course, the primary and the tertiary having that well-developed line that we talked about. But in this case, we don't have a whole lot of complexity or we don't have a whole lot of concentration here either. It's like good. And just knowing what Pipeno is, it's not meant to be aged for a long time. It's meant to be consumed immediately, youthful, while it's fresh. So I say, don't worry about aging this. You should, if you're gonna get it, load up, and then it's like a perfect chill it, drink it over. If you're a red wine drinker, if you're gonna drink red wine at a barbecue or a poolside, I think it's like a perfect thing to throw in the cooler. But outside of that, I wouldn't worry about aging this at all. So I would say this is drinking great now and drinking now, and don't worry about aging. I think this wine will be fine. I don't think it's gonna fall apart next year, but in the next year or two. But I wouldn't age it for the purpose of increasing complexity. That's basically what I'm saying. Cool. So that's how the grid is played. And again, I know that is a very long time. First week always takes long because I have to kind of explain all these things, but it goes much faster for moving forward or next week. And then we'll again assign one person to do what section. Any questions about anything that I just went over? Any disagreements? Anything else that sticks out to you about this wine? Okay. So let me talk about the mouse for a second. So
before you do that, I just real quick, I just want to say when I first opened the bottle, it
Yeah.
was super smoky.
uh-huh.
Where does that come from? It blew off after like 20 minutes, but when I first opened it, it was really smoky. Is that from like toasting the barrel, or is that?
I mean, there's no barrels here. I mean, it's literally that old ass beechwood, that giant open fermenter goes into another super old neutral barrels for a little bit, and then it gets bottled. Not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure, to tell the truth. I mean, to me, the kind of smokiness that I got was more reminiscent of kind of like the soil, like the volcanic soil. And then there's some volcanic soil that's here in this part. But yeah, if it's blowing off like that quickly, then it probably is not so. So I don't know, we may be talking about something.
Okay.
Yeah, not sure. Any other questions? Okay, so let's talk about mouse for a second, because this is important. This doesn't come up all the time, but it has come up a few times in the wine club. So in the natural wine world, this mouse problem has become really common and really problematic. And a lot of it is just, again, when you're playing with 001, when you're playing with no sulfites, this is kind of the kind of no protection that you have. So nobody really understands even till now how mouse exactly happened. There's some speculations of pH level being too high during fermentation, the fermenting environment being not inhospitable enough to bad bacteria to die or grow off during fermentation. So there's some of that happening, but nobody really understands. There's no real definitive answer to why mouse happens or how it happens. But what we're talking about is some wines, particularly, and this can happen with wines that even had sulfites added, but particularly with the wines that have not had any sulfites added. Oftentimes, if you let the wine sit for a little bit, after a while, my wine is already starting to show already. So if yours been open for a while, you probably start to get it as well already. But there's a little bit of this kind of like popcorny, kind of like, I don't know what the best word is. I don't know why it's called mouse, because to me, it doesn't remind me of gerbil or like mouse. But like there's just like popcorny, like really unpleasant kind of a flavor and the aftertaste that lingers around, and that's called mouse. I guarantee you that if you want to know what I'm talking about, just leave this, drink most of it tonight, like right now, but come back tomorrow. Just reserve yourself a little bit and come back tomorrow and taste it, and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard to miss because and it's always at the end. You cannot smell mouse. That's another thing. Like when you pour yourself a wine that has mouse in it, like you can't smell it. You can only taste it, which is the unfortunate part because it's really unpleasant. And also there are some people who are completely immune to mouse. Like you don't taste mouse. So some of you may not get it at all. But if you're like most people, then tomorrow when you come back to this wine, you're going to get it. And then that is something that has been plaguing the natural wine industry, particularly the 00 natural wine industry, for a long time, and it's popping up everywhere. And again, nobody really understands why that happens. It's not necessarily the hygiene issue, because you would see different parts of wine, like this wine would have gone wrong in many different ways if there's a hygiene issue. But yeah, so there it is. But only thing to do when you start to get mouse is drink it fast. Really, it's the only thing you can do. All right. Any other questions? Cool. Let's play everyone's favorite game. How much do you think this wine is on a retail shelf? How much would you be happy paying for this on a retail shelf? We call it good, right? It's Pipeno. It's also Chilean, right? Never, not. It's also liter, not 750. How about that? 18, 22, 24, 25, 25, 30, 30, 18, 20, 20. And the winner is right on the dot, Cecilia and Kirsten, 20. This is 20 on the retail shelf, which means this is a $15 if this was a $7.50. Like that's crazy value if you ask me. Like I'd be happy paying 15 for this bottle any day. So yeah, $20. That's what you get. But there you go. Did you guys like this one, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, again, thank you, Charles, for the heads up. I mean, there was no danger of us not drinking this within the hour and a half, but I was expecting, just because like we've had a lot of pepinos, this one when it came off a little smoky, but I really liked that. You know, yeah, like it had just like that slightly different flavor. I did blow off a little bit.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it at first. It wasn't a deficiency for me.
That's what I like about this, right? Like a lot of Pipenos, as delicious and it is oftentimes it's just like a fucking adult glue chug juice. You know what I mean? But this one has a little more layers at that. Like there's some textural component with the tannin. There's a little bit of smoke. So yeah, I thought this was actually quite well made. Opinion, but yeah. Charles, you gave one thumb up, one thumb down. Before mouse, you liked it. After mouse, you didn't like it.
Yeah, hour 1, hour 2.
Yeah. Fair. That's fair. That's fair. Any other questions?
First 10 minutes were too smoky.
Okay.
Then it was delicious. It also had a little effervescence to it, which I liked.
Yeah. And that's also very oftentimes what you will find with Pipeno, because it's just like kind of like a Beaujolais Nouveau as well. It's just like it's very freshly fermented, done fermenting wine. So yeah, you will oftentimes find a little bit of that dissolved CO2 thing going on, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just now I think starting to like lose a little bit of that freshness set. Yeah. So I've got a lot to drink in the next half hour.
When I first cracked it, I just got like pure pencil lead, and I guess you could call it smoky, but it's like the smoky, like when you've had like charcoal just finishing smoking, and it's like not in a good way. Smoky like barbecue or whatever. It's like no, this is like a lead.
Yeah.
So I just
it's like a briquette.
I just decanted immediately because I was like, I almost like one of those. So like it mellowed out really quickly. Really.
Did that work? So I always get nervous about decanting wines that have shown a little bit of mouse, possibility of mouse, because it can also, that exposure to oxygen can just kind of shoot that off real fast.
Well, there's no
not
danger,
all of them.
like,
But
actually,
sometimes.
I never like had it bottled for the next day. That doesn't really make any sense to me. But like if you have a bottle this big and you have like you pour that much out of it, like chemistry wise, like really is that going to be good in like 30 minutes? No.
I mean, just for that.
I just decanted immediately and threw it in the fridge. But
yeah, if you have an experienced mouse, if any of you, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say mouse, for education purposes, honestly, like save a little bit and come back to it tomorrow. Like you will know. Like I guarantee you that this will be mousy.
That's culturally impossible for me, but I respect your angle.
All right. I respect it.
I'm from New England. I just, I respect what you're going after there.
I respect it. Any other questions? How many of you, is this your first time having Pipeno? I guess most of you have been on this wine club, so you've had a Pipeno. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I really, I don't know. I love Pipenos. I think these are the kind of stuff that I feel like the real stuck up wine people would just like, scoff at. They're like, that's not real wine. That's just a fucking plunk juice. But
I really liked the first time you did Chile box and did Pipeno. I was blown away. It was really
yeah.
I was like, this is fun,
Exactly.
Yeah, right. It's very much like Beaujolais. It has like that.
Precisely. It's not not all wines should be these fucking deep. Yeah, deep like a cerebral thinking wine. Some of them are just meant to be easy drunk and just enjoy it and have fun. Like, and to me, like this is like a party wine, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I like their dedication to liter bottles too.
Yeah.
Like it's like almost always in a liter. Do you like?
Because 750 just ain't enough. You know what I mean? Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. In that case, I'm gonna turn off the recording.